associated this meeting with the 12th. I know it's on my email that said on the 12th. And apparently I scheduled city planning to come to the 12th as well. I just checked my email now. I don't know why I thought it was the 12th. So we are not going to have the presentation by city planning. I'll have to call them and see when we can get them here again. They're coming to the borough board in July as well. So maybe that's an option. They were trying to get it, it was somewhat time sensitive because they're putting in the new process for this fall. So they wanted to get to both the service cabinet and borough board as soon as possible. If you guys want to do another meeting with city planning on that, I'm happy to arrange that. You guys tell me. We can go from there. But for some reason, I had the wrong date. I kept associating it with the wrong date. So that there is no meeting. There is no meeting on the 12th at all. For some reason, I thought that this Tuesday was the 12th. So,
And what are they presenting to the borough board?
there's a new process there, or a new procedure they want to start doing for the district needs assessments, starting in the fall. So they want to go over their enhancements to the process.
So, Andrew, how new is it? Because they did this last year when we went downtown. Where did we go? Do you remember?
Right, we went to Reed Street.
Yeah, and they presented a lot of ways of getting information on their website, and I think presented a new layout that they were recommending.
I don't think it's so much that. I think it's how I think it's the change in the schedule of how they're going to be soliciting the feedback from the districts. Is my understanding. How is not so much what information is available for you to utilize, but how they're going to take the information from you that you guys submit, and how that process is going to work. That's how it was described to me. And obviously we won't be able to hear from it today, but I can try to schedule another day if that works. You know, you guys.
Aren't the district needs due in August though? Late August? Yeah.
But that's not inconsistent if the statement is, it's not about what we give them, but what they do with what we give them. And it can be late.
I'm interested in knowing because I've always felt like it sort of flaps out there in the wind after you do it. So if they really, I'd be interested in hearing how they're going to utilize that in planning and.
Right. Okay. So I will.
So just in case some of you haven't heard through the grapevine, Carl Weisbrod also has an image of taking over the community board's role in the budgeting process, particularly capital budget, and relinking it to planning, which is what it was originally linked to in the first place. It's part of the reason why Mickey Josephs and Peter Sugar, Pat Shoddy, and Randy Canetta haven't been replaced because it looks like OMB is being phased out of the community board business. City planning is being phased in. There's an internal plan that's been moved around from agency to agency, and they actually have a pretty good blueprint for what it looks like, although I think there's still some hanging over details about who's going to be responsible for what. Of course, when I heard this, my first criticism was, well, why aren't we involved in the planning process? And, you never get really far when you have an argument like that. People are starting it off that way. But you should know that there are bigger changes that city planning has in mind, and they were hoping to roll it out this past March, so it looks like they're pretty eager to get going on this.
Would this Friday work for everyone if we were to just keep it on the calendar and then just schedule some time here at Borough Hall? Morning? Or you can get back to me by the end of today. Just because they already have it on their calendar, if this Friday works already, we can try to shoot for that. Let me just double check the availability here at Borough Hall, make sure we have a room available for 9:30. If we could do 9:30 or 10, whatever. But let me just double check with them and see if we have space here at the building, just make sure that there's availability. And if not, we'll schedule something else, next week as soon as possible. That sound all right?
Yeah.
I guess before we continue, we might as well take the roll and start the meeting. Welcome to the June Borough Service Cabinet meeting. We'll go quickly down the list. Community Board 1, Community Board 2, Community Board 3, Community Board 4, Community Board 5, Community Board 6, Community Board 7,
Here.
Community Board 8, Community Board 9,
Yeah.
Community Board 10,
Here.
Community Board 11,
Here.
Community Board 12, Community Board 13, Community Board 14,
Here.
Community Board 15, Community Board 16,
Here.
Community Board 17, Community Board 18. All right. So with that, it's open forum. So The only update I have are two updates. Number one, at our last kind of roundtable, we talked about doing something with sanitation. That's your idea about sanitation and the exploding manhole covers. So we are actually in the process of sending over a letter to DEP, NDSNY for a pilot program to put sensors in the sewers. Because the issue, as we understand, is that there's a gas buildup that ignites, and that's why the manholes explode. There are sensors that are out there that measure the gas, and when they hit a certain point, you can then be alerted to go check it and clear out the backlog. So that should eliminate the problem of exploding manholes in theory. So we've been talking to them, and we're drafting a letter asking them to consider such a pilot program. And then depending on what the response is to that, we will then bring them back here and kind of do more and see how we can get more aggressive with them at that point.
So I think that exploding manhole covers was the symptom, but the disease was the effects of salt
Right.
on roadways. And it has more than just the effect of exploding manhole covers, which does cause property and personal injury. We do get a lot of complaints from people about sidewalks being eroded and impact on pets and other things besides just exploding manhole covers, which is obviously the most explosive side effect. But the issue for us has been, whether or not sanitation can or will consider alternatives to salt. And the answer has always been, yes, we can do other things, but it's more expensive. And I think we need to do something to break beyond that logjam in our conversation with them. So, Community Board 7 got the ball rolling last summer, and we just followed suit, encouraging them to consider doing some kind of a pilot alternative to salt. We're not talking about immediately changing over to something that's going to be new and more expensive if it's on trial. But we'd at least like to see that they're thinking along alternative lines. Frankly, if you just Google salt in municipalities and roadways, you'll see that there's plenty of other places that are trying all sorts of different things out there. So I'm curious to know what they're thinking about, what they're trying, and they don't seem to either want to share that information with us or they don't have anything to share with us. Either way, I'd just like to try to move this conversation beyond it's too expensive and we're not trying.
But Craig, they also do use,
Phenomenal amount of research on this.
well, they use another chemical, sodium chloride is another thing that they use, and I think there might also be some labor complications with introducing some of these new, because I know that that's been one that, gets all over everybody. They have to wear special uniforms if they're using it in certain doses. But is that what they're using more in 7?
I'm not aware. Jeremy's working on this project with our committee. So I don't know the outcome of this yet.
But just to open up the conversation, we thought that it would make sense to have sanitation and Con Edison in the same room at the same time because it might be a gas buildup. It might also just simply be salt arcing, which is something that it tends to do when it comes in contact with electricity and water. And I thought that it would be nice to hear from Con Edison since there have been such an increase over the years in the building of these types of events occurring coincidental with the icing salting season. So if we could ask Con Edison to come in prepared to talk about their manhole cover explosions and other critical failures that they believe were attributed to the use of salt. And we should push them on what they're doing from their side to make their equipment more resistant for that, assuming that it's going to continue in the near future. And at the same time, as sanitation, what kinds of things they're thinking about or experimenting with. I think it could be a really good, lively conversation if we can get them engaged.
Agreed. So we'll circle back to them and we'll bring them back here again as well. The other
Sensors are a great idea.
I think it's pretty cool. They have these sensors, we're not using them, so there's that. The other thing I wanted to circle back to you all with on our end was the Wi-Fi kiosks. I know we kind of set kind of a rough deadline of June or so to get some feedback from the community boards from our written presentations. I've only got any feedback from one board so far. So, I mean, it's kind of a loose deadline. So if you have information you can share with us, that'd be great. We'd like to have it coming out over the course of the summer from Borough Hall based on your feedback. And we haven't set our internal deadline yet, but at some point we're going to put something out there, and we'd rather do it with your information than not. So you guys tell me, is there interest in providing that type of information to us? Do you guys just need more time? Is it something the boards aren't taking to?
Well, for us, and it fell off the radar for a little while, is getting somebody in to speak to my executive committee and other interested board members and have that presentation so that they're thinking about it with more information. And so we would certainly need more time, but I can move to try to set that up for June. We wouldn't be able to bring it back to a board meeting and take action, but at least we would start this conversation more intelligently.
So you're saying that it was just hard to kind of pin down?
No, it's all all
Okay.
on me.
No, that's okay.
Mea culpa.
That's fine, okay.
And Andrew, we had a few meetings on the topic, and the board just voted, so we'll be getting out a letter
Okay.
with our recommendations probably the end of the week.
Okay, all right. Good.
We have to do it scheduled for the next week.
Okay.
So we'll be engaging, we're supposed to come in May, we have to schedule, so we're definitely getting something.
So do we think that we want to say the end of the summer is fair enough? I mean, I know you guys are off July, no meetings July and August. Is that enough time to kind of put something together? Do we want to say end of September, beginning of October? Is that more realistic given the schedules?
If you could say into September, and if we could get it to you sooner, we would, and if we can't, then at least it would go to our first September meeting if we feel like we need a full board.
Of course, yeah, obviously we want to be as deliberative as necessary in order
Yeah.
to kind of solicit this feedback. So the end of September sounds good for most folks, everyone?
Thank you.
I'd be interested to hear from the boards who are making this a matter of board action. That never even occurred to me, so I'd be intrigued to hear what the rationale was for doing it that way.
So prior to the kiosk proposal, whenever our board had a PPT proposal, we assigned it to the committee because we invited the members of the board. We assigned it to the committee and people in the community, the merchant strips, to see how they felt about this being on the curbside, on the commercial strip. Some blocks supported, some blocks opposed in the past. So when this proposal came, we wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that they were going to be replaced with a different size type and a different kind of device. And we wanted to give the opportunity to our merchant groups, our community organizations to come to a presentation by Zoom to learn about the proposal, to understand what was happening. If they had objections about certain sites, that we had an opportunity to at least voice that to the department. We actually had a lot of questions about the height, the size, aesthetics is very important in our board, so we had a lot of those questions. And that's why we decided to present it to the committee, so we had the opportunity to public.
Did safety concerns arise?
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of questions about security and safety and the ability to, what it would mean, yes.
I think for us, it's probably an issue of there not being enough PPTs left in the district for this to be meaningful in the first phase, which is why we were looking at the possible retrofitting of fire alarm boxes and whether the technology would support that. And also to just in general make a point of the resiliency needs of Nuance and Red Hook, which are absent PPTs entirely, to see whether or not they could make some kind of an exception for particularly vulnerable communities that will need to rely on that kind of technology in an emergency situation. So, frankly, it was really just to broaden the conversation and make more people aware of what the city's plans were to see if they could influence them in some way.
Any other thoughts on that? Okay, so we'll shoot for a target deadline at the end of September, and then, as needed, we can kind of adjust from there. Hopefully by then we can have enough influence from the board to put our own report out there as well. That's all I have, but now I turn it over to you guys. With Lindsay? Yeah, that was me. Yeah. Now it's open to you guys. What's going on? What do we want to talk about, throw it open completely. Take it away.
I would assume that most of you have seen the email I sent out yesterday. So we have a moderator for all 13 of the agencies. Probably different people handle the pulling together of questions in different ways in different boards. We do it in committee, at least it starts there, and then massage it in the office. But if we can get that largely done in the next 2 weeks, that would be great. I'm going to take a couple days off, and then I'll come back and check in again. If anyone didn't get that email, I'd be happy to resend it.
What is this referring to? I'm sorry.
Well, it refers to the agendas for the borough budget consultations. And I met with Jay Gottlieb last week, and as Craig mentioned, Carl Weisbrod wants to integrate better OMB and DCP, and it seems that Jay figures very prominently in that. He's got an office and an email and a telephone number at both agencies. I assume he only gets one check. And so he seems to figure very much in sort of the direction of where this is going, and will be someone good for us to know and be in touch with.
Thanks for pulling that together too, Rob.
Well, actually, I pulled it together, but what happened is DMs and chairs stepped up with a minimum of arm twisting, so thanks doesn't go to me, the thanks goes to all of you.
So should we just agree that within the next 2 weeks, if we have questions that we want to put on everybody's respective agendas, that we'll get those to one another by the end of this month?
Well,
Is
I'm
that-
going to check in on 2 weeks from yesterday is the 22nd. I'll probably start checking in that week before I take off Thursday and Friday, and then I'll check in again when we get back. The deadline we were originally given was the 6th. I know from last year the world doesn't end on the deadline, but it's both courteous and efficient to try and hit it.
Okay. Anyone else?
Well, on that subject, I guess it's sort of a gentle reminder, since we're doing this as a group this year, I know I'll be doing this for myself. Slightly different mindset in terms of forming the questions. Yes, I'm interested in what's going on the corner of Court and Baltic Street, but because this is a group setting, I'm more interested in what the average response time to potholes is in Brooklyn, broken down by community board districts. So it's a slightly different mentality that I'll be approaching this with, trying to make the questions as broad-based as possible, yet something that means something to my district at the same time. Just with my way of
I was hoping that Jay would send out the agenda forms already. You may want to take a look at previous years. What I've done in the past is arrange the topics according to the topics that are listed at the top of the page. They've said that's what we want to talk about, and so you're speaking the same language. I think there may be a couple of changes in how this is handled this fall from the past. Last year we had some instances where people submitted questions and then did not attend the consultation itself. After discussing this with Jay, I think that if you're not there to hear the answers to your questions, then those questions probably are not going to be addressed at the consultation.
That could also be avoided by having the question be more general and less specific to a, to a community board.
But obviously, capital-intensive agencies, sanitation, parks, DOT, those are inevitably going to lead to some HPD, some specific questions. Also, Andrew, there was Jay doesn't feel that he is going to, and I apologize. I'm going to ask the question anyway, but I apologize for asking in front of a bunch of people. If the answer is awkward, I apologize.
Sorry, we're just talking. No, it's okay.
Jay feels that they're not going to be able to get note takers for all of the consultations. When I was a policy analyst here, I used to go to all the parks meetings of all of the community boards because I wanted to hear what all the community boards were thinking about the area that I reported to the borough president. So based on that model, it occurs to me that one source of potential note takers would be Borough Hall staff on an agency responsible basis and have them come and take the notes. The notes then get taken, that person's worldview is broadened. They hear what the agencies have to say, they hear what the community boards have to say. I'm hoping that it's a win-win-win for all concerned. And so that statement comes in the form of a request, or that request comes in the form of a statement.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I will check with our policy staff here. We've reorganized the way our policy staff and our unit operates, so it's not necessarily agency or issue specific as much as it used to be. So that doesn't mean that we can't have staff here still and that we shouldn't have staff here still. But I don't want to commit to having a parks person here or a schools person here or a DOT person here or whatever. We don't really operate on that specific model anymore. But let me take it back to the borough president. I'll talk to Ryan as well. I don't see why we couldn't or why we shouldn't have staff members here as well. I know I have the consultations on my calendar. I think I'm good for 2 out of the 3 so far. So I mean, we'll definitely be in presence as well. As well, if it's helpful, we can also have the sessions recorded, so there's a record of it. We can always circle back to and make that video available. I don't know if those meetings are. I guess those meetings would be open meetings, compliant. So they would probably be recorded anyway, or a record made available anyway. So we could do that as well. So there would be some type of record of the meeting. So I'll circle back to you all on that for sure, and then we'll go from there.
Are we moving on?
Yeah. Free for all. Just lay it out there.
I don't think we've ever come to even a step in the right direction in terms of a resolution on DEP notifications. And I've had, I could get anecdotal. There's a few things that has happened recently that makes my blood boil. So what next? We've had them here. They've made commitments. They haven't kept the commitments. They're not communicating. They don't know. Sometimes they're not communicating because they don't know within. And it's a problem in that agency. So one thought I had, and I don't know if this is getting dropped, but there's like a New York City comptroller performance audit on the agency. But is there something that we can continue to do here as a group to try to move this issue? Or have we tried and we're throwing up our hands and there's got to be another way? And am I the only one? I mean, are we sick of it? Are we giving up?
I mean, maybe I need some clarity on this, because in my conversations with them, I know in emergency situations, we're not going to get a notification if it's an emergency situation. So give me an example of a situation where something's being done by DEP and we should have gotten a notice on it in advance.
Well, can I just say, and I don't want to be the dead horse because we've gone through this many hours. I'm sorry. For my district that has many collapses and cave-ins, I put many on our capital and expense priorities, and they are still not deemed a capital project. Okay? It goes to emergency notification.
Maybe we talk two different things. That's because she's saying notification.
No. What I'm saying to you is I don't believe there is any sewer work that's being done on a capital end.
Mm-hmm.
There's no planning. I think they're pushing them all to emergency notifications.
When that happens, are you notified? No.
Allowing them to break and collapse. Have any of you gotten any capital upgrades other than complete reconstructions?
No, and the other thing, so they call it an emergency, but we had one recently. It was an emergency notification, and it wasn't. It was 2 days after it began, so it wasn't even the 24-hour notice. It was 2 days after it began. And then they said it was an emergency, but I pulled some, and then I asked for additional 311 and other complaint data. This had been a problem for 2.5 years. So they wait and wait and wait, and then they call it, and it had been in the plan prior to the emergency job, but I don't know if this is how they're handling things budget-wise, that they have budget for emergency and not ongoing, and so they make it an emergency, but there's no way they didn't know they were doing the work. The other thing is that then I had a routine, just a sewer flush routine, on Foster Avenue, which I take to work every day. So the first day I saw the truck out there with the tubes going down the manhole and another hose to the fire hydrant, so you know it's sewer. So I called DEP, I asked Denise what's going on. She said, we don't have anything there. I said, well then that's scary, you know. So then she said she'd look into it. This went on for 5 days. I called every day, and have you found out? Finally it was over, and the response I got was, well, they're not there anymore. Like, I shouldn't be interested because they're not even there anymore. And then there was another one where it was a sinkhole, and we sent it to DOT. DOT sent DEP the car. Then we followed up because it wasn't corrected. DEP said they didn't have it. We went back to DOT and said, do you have the number? Do you have some reference showing that you had sent it to DEP? They said, no, we don't do it like that. You have to do a 311 again, which was ridiculous. They were going to then check with HIQA. Then DEP, then it got repaired by DEP. So I went back and I said, you must have had something because somebody went out and repaired it. They never could find it in the office, even though it had worked in terms of getting repaired. But that's indicative of a huge problem. When you don't even know that you have what you have to have, even though it came to a resolution, the communication even within there's a problem there.
And I just want to add another example, Henry. On Ovington and 3rd Avenue in our district, we had a series of recurring depressions in the intersection that we call the same process, DOT to DEP. One day I just so happened to be out at the intersection on my personal time. It was a Saturday, and National Grid was out, and they were digging. And I went over and I said, what are you guys, up to? Is there a problem, a break? And they said, no, we're moving lines in preparation of an upcoming job here at the intersection. So Monday morning, I called Denise. I said, do we have an upcoming sewer job? She told me no. We don't have one coming up. The next week, DEP was out there digging, replacing probably a 7-foot piece of sewer pipe. I called her back, and she said, oh, yeah, we did have it. You'll get a notice tomorrow. Not good enough. Not good enough.
Okay.
And we have areas in our district, I could tell you, I could rattle them off, where DEP has come back and said we have minor cracks throughout a sewer line, and we have areas that continually depress. Now, those sewers are not being placed on capital lists. They're going to wait till there's a break, and they're going to deem it emergency. And there's this big pool of emergency money, but we need to be planning, I feel anyway, how it used to operate, where you had areas that we requested on our capital list that were completely refurbished, because these roadways are not getting resurfaced by DOT because they won't touch them because of the recurring depressions. The Department of Environmental Protection also decided on their own, without speaking to government, to eliminate their trench restoration funding, which is also eliminated. And now it's not 20 locations, but I have a handful of locations where DOT is not touching because they're in need of trench restoration. We had our council member, Vincent Gentili, meet with DEP and DOT several months ago on this topic, and they still haven't come up with a plan. They weren't responsive to us, so right now there's not even a mechanism to handle these trench restorations aside from the notification. But we don't receive notification. It just hasn't been.
And just listening to the three of you, this sounds like more of a budget issue and not really a notification. What we're talking about here.
Well,
I mean, just as far as that, when problems are developing, and you're saying they got rid of the trench program, right? We're saying obviously there's a lack of funding going on towards specific programs within DEP. So I'm just saying that
I agree. It is multifaceted.
We need to start focusing on the budget aspect of this.
Right. But also there was a notification process. There was always a process in place at DEP. It wasn't the greatest, but there was a procedure that when there was an order issued to make a sewer repair, it was an SRN notice that was sent to the community boards.
Did I remember?
And that has stopped. And I just find that not to be acceptable. Because even if the notification, I knew it was coming up, I knew it was pending, I knew there was a break, and I knew to watch out for it. But right now that unit is not communicating to community Affairs who communicated to us, that system was set up for a direct notification to the community boards for the very reason that we would know about our infrastructure and when those repairs were being made. And that notification has stopped. And frankly, I think it helped me a lot in the district to plan and to know what our street infrastructure needs were, and also keep track of capital work in the district.
So what did I miss at the meeting? Because when DEP was here, didn't they agree to go back to the notifications?
And they did not.
They agreed to use the diagram, the schematic, they agreed to basically adopt
Right.
everything as it used to be. That's what they committed to. And they were very careful to draw a distinction though between the emergency and non-emergency work. But if
Right.
all they're doing now, if they're putting everything into the emergency bucket, they're getting around the notification.
But all that work previously was emergency work. So this distinction now that I feel that they're trying to create doesn't exist. Because when you have a break, you have a repair order. It was those orders that were sent directly to the community board from that unit. And now they're... Yes, and that was deemed an emergency. And that emergency, by the way, Andrew, could have taken place weeks or months from that initial notification, which is why I think, and Craig had mentioned, it wasn't the ideal notification, but at least we had a notice of upcoming work. They have actually told that unit of DEP, because we speak to them, I kind of asked him, I called up Bruce Robinson, I said, what happened? He goes, I don't know, one day I was ordered not to do it anymore. So there was a decision that was made not to notify the boards of these repair jobs, and frankly, we tried many times to work this out, and it's just not working. And it really needs to be fixed.
When you first started speaking about it, I thought that, well, I do get the notifications, and those are the supposedly emergencies. However, I hear what you're saying, and I think that what we're not getting information on, and I don't know if anybody else, is anybody else getting any emergencies? Because I got a phone call and an email yesterday concerning what they deemed emergency.
It's some, don't get others.
Okay.
But no rhyme or reason to what I'm getting and what I'm not.
All right. However, the other part of her conversation was the systematic stuff that they're no longer doing, and that without a doubt has to be a budgetary issue. And as we begin the process for our consultations, if we all boards indicate that that is our problem, and there's no planning or communicating of the plan, not only, and are we supposed to talk about that, but we also could use the Borough President's office. And I understand that we've done it, but like everything else, it's not going to change into a change, so that means that we have to keep doing it.
So I think this would be a conversation with DCP. If they're going, I mean, I don't know what the changes are, but if we're going to have more input into that capital process, I think we need more information from DEP to make those decisions. And maybe that's something they can help us with as well.
So the effective section of the city charter, section 86, I encourage you all to take a look at what the language says in section 86, because it's not limited to DEP. It's anyone who disrupts the roadway surface is required to notify. So it's DEP, it's DOT, it's all the utilities, it's everyone that digs out there. And DOT actually solved that problem by coming up with that permitting system and sending us those emails every morning at 7 a.m. So now we're notified of everything that's going on according to their system. DEP still has a lot of work to do in notifying us on basic stuff and on emergency stuff. On emergency stuff, they don't have to notify us before they go out there, but according to section 86, they do have to notify us within a certain time period after they start. And the utilities are still hit and miss. Some of them do a better job than others. Some of them provide us with more information. Some of them might forget to tell us about certain things. It occurred to me that while we've been banging our heads against the wall trying to deal with DEP in a very respectful way, that the law itself could possibly be strengthened. Section 86 could be strengthened. If we were to engage the city council in a conversation about strengthening section 86 of the city charter, I know I'm just dreaming here, but I can dream with my colleagues. Maybe there's a penalty imposed on people who fail to notify community boards, and anyone who fails to notify a community board has to pay that community board $10,000 because we're impacted by it. So the point of the matter is that we could be a little more creative in how we approach this from a legal side as well as the practical side, and a conversation perhaps with the city council might be in order.
That actually might not be a bad idea, because didn't Councilmember Cumbo just pass the legislation where I think it's ACS has to give a certain amount of reports by the end of the year. So obviously there's a precedent for agencies are required as far as reporting within the agency, that if that's a law that can be written, that actually might not be a bad idea.
It's already required that they
Yes.
notify
Right.
us.
So we
it's
just
not-
kind of add
But
teeth,
there's no
add teeth, right, we're gonna add teeth to
There's
it.
no
It's
enforcement.
unenforceable.
So basically, what you kind of say is that when there is an issue, they're deeming everything an emergency. So if they deem it an emergency, they can't say, oh, well, we didn't have time to notify you.
Yes and no, it's also a planning issue. I mean, I know, I look at DOT's permits every day. I know kind of what's going on. I see by the sinkholes what should be deemed capital. But what's happening is we don't have, other than the notification, which is a big deal, I think it's two separate issues. Because how do you present to your community or the city what upgrades are needed to be sustainable?
So when you're getting 301 complaints coming in saying that there's a sinkhole taking place, which we know obviously something's going on.
Right.
You're saying then instead of them coming out dealing with the matter, because we've had that problem also with sinkholes, we know something's going on. And if it's a sinkhole, DOT's not going to touch it. They say it's water, something's going with the pipe. Instead of them dealing with it right there and then, they're just waiting until a disaster happened, and then they're coming out and going to repair it and rip up the whole street.
Yes, I have a location that is depressed. It's a trench that runs 2 avenues that has been called in time and time again. DOT comes out, issues cars to DEP. I have to have HIQA out there once a month to make sure that I, God forbid, don't have a situation that Josephine had on 92nd Street. Then I am told, and not officially, but DEP in February did dye tests and televised
Right.
that line, and it is broken.
And then what
So
happened after that?
It's sitting there. We're waiting for a
Oh, and they haven't done any
tragedy.
work yet.
Yeah, also, Henry, when you do a 311 regarding a cave-in or a street condition, and it gets referred, it has a CAR to another agency, and we'll use DEP since we're talking about the agency, that job on 311 is closed out. There's no way to track that CAR. There's no way for me as a manager to track that CAR other than to call Denise.
And then when so basically it sounds like when they're not doing the follow-up work on the CAR.
Well, and if they
and
are,
then-
we don't know, and there's no way to track it
No.
currently.
Okay.
I just want to add that they do have the capability of notifying, even if it's read the emergency work. I mean, I'm just looking at the email that I got on Friday. DEP investigating a leak condition intersection of 18th and 50th. We currently have an unscheduled water shutdown. Shutdown limits are 51st, 18th, dead end, 50th Street, and 18th dead end. This was real emergency work.
Right.
They sent me a notification. And then they're able to do it, so why not do it for everything?
Right. I got that also.
That's what they're saying.
Right.
No, I'm just kind of like just really get a full understanding because we're sort of going through the same thing with the sinkholes and them not dealing with it at that moment. And as you stated, they're waiting for the pipe to just explode and then it becomes an
Or
emergency.
they're going to fill it and buy time and see if it
It should
sinks,
be
you
automatic.
know.
The workload is generated.
Well, that's what it was. When that workload was
That's what
generated,
they're
we had
saying.
a
It should
copy
be
of it.
automatic. I mean, you're doing work, automatic.
Was it automatic that they would have a date and time of when they're going to come out and do the
No,
repair?
When the work order was issued on the SRN, it said work order number, so you had a number, you had a little map, a little diagram, that where the break was, and it was that notification was sent to community boards, it was sent to the police precinct. There was an automatic notification process, and DEP made a decision to stop that.
And you had a specific name at the bottom that told you who was personally responsible for that job in
Yep.
the agency, so you could follow up directly, which was also extremely useful to have.
And once again, I'm feeling that this is a budget issue because there's not enough money allocated in the budget to deal with these sinkhole problems. Because that's what was happening in the past, and they were automatically notifying us, which means once they notified us, which means then they had to have some time frame of when they're going to go out and do this work. But because of lack of monies within that department, within DEP, obviously they're not going to put that out about notifications, because once the notifications come out, then we're going to start harassing them on when the work's going to get done.
Henry, I agree with you
that's
that
what
I
I'm-
agree with you that it's budgetary, but I think it's also I think it's interrelated problems, and part of it is communication, outward communication, and a policy, a proactive policy to not communicate to community boards and other city agencies. Then there's their internal communication problem, which is like they simply don't know and can't find information even when they're trying. Then there are the budget problems and the defunding of the trench restoration. Then there's the interaction with other city agencies like DOT. And I think the idea of reaching out to city planning so that we are trying to get them to be proactive and that would help with the communication, I think is brilliant. Working with elected officials could be helpful. I'm still kind of stuck on the idea of requesting a performance audit with the city comptroller's office, but maybe keeping them more cooperative by not threatening that would be a better thing at this stage, but I don't know because
Or maybe asking a meeting with the commissioner herself. I mean, this is her agency. If we have these issues or problems, maybe going directly to the source and the top person in charge is the best way to start before.
Yeah, because she may not even know what's going on.
Right.
She may not even know what's going on as far as dealing with
And
community
she's always
boards.
been very friendly.
So could
Yeah.
we
I
do that
The
then?
commissioner was
that
the
the
one
next
who
best
sent the
step?
letter to us saying that they're going to reinstate that old policy. So, we can definitely invite the commissioner again and say that we're still having issues, for sure.
And I think it would only work if Commissioner Lloyd was here herself,
Right.
Okay.
in my opinion. I don't know how to do it.
I agree.
Well, I don't think there's any city agency commissioner who would want to come before a borough service cabinet in any borough and have to face the question of, this was discussed over multiple months, and you personally made a commitment that has not been executed. Why not?
The invitation alone, though, could spur the agency to start acting on that.
Well, could it be at one of these meetings, so it's not on the spot with other agencies present? Would that be better, do you think,
More
Rob?
of a direct conference with the commissioner.
I worked for Howard Golden, so I have a certain taste for the monthly blow-up.
Uh-oh. I just have a suggestion now that y'all mentioned, maybe at these district manager-only meetings, we can have certain commissioners here from agencies that we're having issues with. Because you're right, I don't think I want to come before all the other agencies reps here, but we can just have us with the particular agency commissioner, or I would go for the city commissioner, but if not, we can get the borough commissioner. Maybe we should, think about that, having them at just this particular meeting. But it's just district managers.
Our next district manager only meeting is November, I believe, right? Yeah. So we could do two things. We can invite DEP to come sooner than that, or we could hold off and then invite her to the November meeting just with you guys and try to address it there. I'll take my direction from you either way. I'm fine with either option. What do you all?
Well, what do you have for the meetings prior to?
September, there's a few. There's a DDC presentation. There's a DOT presentation, and there's one other off the top of my head. October is empty right now, as far as I recall, and November obviously is empty as well.
Could we swap it and have October be the DM only with DEP, and then November would be
Yep.
open to agenda items?
That's fine.
Yeah, because I don't think commissioners want to be put on the spot in front of other agency liaisons and stuff.
I think if we have a commissioner come out, maybe we want to expand the agenda a bit, because there may be other.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. Make it a big agenda for that,
and
whatever
this could
issues are
be
going
one
on.
Element of the agenda, but not the agenda.
Right.
This is there's a lot within this already.
Sure.
The other thing that comes to mind for me, only because Andrew mentioned DDC, whenever we're dealing with agencies such as DEP, DOT, you know, I think they backpedal on DDC. So I believe, and it's only my opinion, that perhaps if we're talking about major jobs, you know, whether you want to call it emergency or otherwise, I think that it's not a bad idea to have DDC in the room. Now, you know, a lot of people may not believe that it works that way, but whenever I had the individual consultations and I talked to DEP about issues, or even DOT for that matter, you know, well, you gotta talk to DDC, you know, it was like the Mo, Larry, Curly game. I think that it's important to have at least those three together.
Well, I think that's part of the issue. The emergency reconstruction or the emergency sewer jobs are done by DEP and their contractors. If it's a capital project, DEP is not involved, it goes to DDC.
But isn't that part of this conversation that we're having?
I think it's two separate entities. One's on a capital side, and this is an emergency reconstruction pot, so to speak.
I think that I hear you, but I do believe that based on the whole conversation, the way I understood it, we would assume that an emergency is an emergency. And that's what we want to be notified of, right? However, based on what you three had said, and I don't disagree with you because you know specifically what's going on in your district, a lot of this stuff should not be emergency when in fact you know in advance that this is a problem that we've had, you brought it to their attention, they know it, they're not going to do anything about it until they deem it an emergency. So in technicality, you're talking about capital jobs.
Well,
Exactly.
There could even be some trigger when something becomes chronic. You know, you're leading up to what's going to eventually
gonna
become an
happen.
emergency if we don't address this chronic issue.
I agree.
Right, when we
That
had,
was just my humble opinion.
when we had the meeting with Councilman Gentili, he invited DEP, DOT, and DDC to the table. And at that table, DDC made it very clear that they only handle capital and their jobs are derived from DOT or DEP. So if they are not funded and if they are not referred the work, then they have nothing to do with it.
Fair.
So do we have a task before us in preparation for this meeting? Should we be getting together our list of issues that have come to our attention or what we want to have addressed? Or does that make it look like a meeting that's just about these issues? I mean, to me, the issues are an illustration of a problem within the agency, so I don't want it to look like we just want answers to these questions. So I guess I'm putting it out there, how do we approach the request for the meeting?
Well, I think the request is we just, you know, from our office, very matter of fact, say there are still ongoing issues that we're hearing from community boards across the borough on these commitments that were made by DEP X number of months ago. We want the commissioner to come and address them with the district managers. Simple as that.
Okay.
And in the interim, I think if everyone can kind of compile their lists of these examples, because what happened last time was, you know, we had the presentation and there were certain statistics that were offered and certain examples that were given of when notifications were made, and then we kind of came to some just quiet resolution, and then that was it. So if we don't have the instances of when they were not notified available, then we're just going to be told when they were doing their job, and that's not going to be fruitful to the conversation as well, correct?
Correct.
So, you know, I will send out the invitation. I will let them know from now that we want to get the commissioner on for the October meeting. I think that's more than enough time to schedule it. And then we will, you know, once I have that confirmed, let's start collecting all of the instances and the examples of problems that we have. We can kind of fine tune and expand the, once we commit that you'll be here, we can expand the topics I think at that point.
I just would want to know, since he wrote that letter and sent it to us, that they're going to do better and whatever, I'd like to know what mechanism was put in place to accomplish this. So is there some internal system that whoever deals with what, water main, sewer, whatever else that they deal with, that there is sort of a process in place that this goes to this, and get to us, if they have no if it's the same thing, and they're just pacifying us with a letter that says, yeah, we hear you, and we're gonna change, and then, but they put nothing in place to change it, I would like to know what that mechanism is. And if they put it in place, we're letting them know that it's not working, maybe they need to tweak it. But if we don't know what it is, I mean,
Right. No, I think that's a very fair point. So we will extend the invitation once her attendance is confirmed. We can then craft a list of questions or an agenda for that meeting, and we can let them even know in advance. These are the things we want to be prepared to talk about with answers, and go from there. We still have some time before we need to finalize that list. So.
I came in late, I'm so sorry. Whatever happened with the city plan?
So I screwed up on that. For some reason, I associated today with being June 12th. As you saw, some of my emails said June 12th about the meeting notice. So I confirmed city planning for a meeting, a service cab meeting on June 12th, which obviously is not today. So we're going to try to shoot to have the meeting anyway this Friday morning. I'm going to confirm if Borough Hall is available. That's when city planning is already scheduled to be here to discuss this. It's somewhat time sensitive for them because they want to start rolling this out over the summer. They will also be presenting at the July 7th Borough Board meeting on the same topic. So if you can't make this Friday for whatever reason, or if this Friday is not available because of Borough Hall issues, there will be another presentation at the July 7th Borough Board meeting as well. And that was just me screwing up the dates for no good reason.
I know how that happened.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other issues, topics, concerns, questions, etc.?
Sorry, I do have the 311 presentation at the last meeting, I thought was a little lackluster and not terribly informative for those of us who are familiar with it already. And so I was hoping there's a way to loop back for something, and especially since they have this new RFP out, and maybe it should be timed according to when they award it or something like that. But I would still like to continue to try to drill down on 311 and how they're using the data and why different agencies interface with it differently, and maybe work it in with Mayor's Office of Operations and the open data, and just continue. I mean, I kind of think that this is going to be something that will always be a work in progress because there are always going to be changes and we're always going to use data differently. But I would just like that to be a continuing conversation and get it into it more.
Okay. We will, no, I think you're absolutely right.
As long as everyone else does, yeah.
No, I mean, there was some of the feedback that I got after the meeting as well from some folks about the presentation. It was useful, but there was a lot of unanswered questions. So do we think a joint presentation with them, MODA, and operations would be useful, or one at a time? I mean, what's the...
One at a time seems pretty dragged out. I mean,
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we could think about is whether or not they could require their consultant to consult with the community boards when they go back and take a fresh look at the redesign of the system, so that we could possibly get into that really early.
Craig, I think it's too
conceptual
late.
stage.
I think they've already designed the what is it? It's not an RFP, RFS, but they've already redesigned it.
So then we have to see how much flexibility there is in whatever tool they're developing for us to be inserted somewhere logically in that flow. Because we don't know what that flow looks like. We don't know how things are going to be affected with the new system. I doubt it's going to really be that noticeable to the general public, but to us it might be. But we don't know. If they could walk us through the system redesign, that would be helpful. That would be a start.
So maybe.
I think that's important. I find utilizing that data, sometimes it's very difficult. We don't have access as community boards to the actual complaint numbers to follow up on those complaints. If you go to open data and you pull them out, so that's 311 complaint becomes exported to the open data. It's very difficult to track, and I'm wondering if the community board, since we're an agency, we're not public, if we can have access, additional layering, so that we can cross-check those complaint numbers to the actual data that we're given.
That's something we were after from day one.
Yeah.
Having, some kind of access to the system directly.
Like council stat?
No, having direct access to the 311 system.
Oh,
So that we can log in, or we can have a terminal in our office. We can look behind the scenes and get the details about the complaints and how they're being handled. That's
Wasn't
always
that-
something that we should be
I think,
pushing
did
for.
someone ask that question at the presentation?
I had asked, I'm very intrigued that, I did a little survey in our office, because we were getting calls from residents that certain 311 complaints, which is.
I can really hear you.
Certain,
I'm sorry, my voice is not that loud. We were getting complaints from residents saying that they made 311 complaints that were not closed, and that they didn't appear on open data. And I asked that question to the presenter because I did my own little test. There was a condition in the district, and for 3 nights I went out. It was commercial vehicles parked overnight. And for 3 days I went out and I called 311, and the complaints were never closed out. They remained opened, overdue, past due, and they didn't appear on open data. And I felt that how can I, as a district manager, ask my precinct for additional services or get tow trucks if I have this condition if it's not reflected in the data? I mean, it's a backbone of support. I had my numbers, I had my responses, but I was hearing from so many residents that they were not, that their 311 complaints were just never closed out. And I wanted to know if there was an issue, a problem with the agency, on the agency end, or why aren't open complaints, because that's a good measurement tool, certainly not going to be reflected in the MMR and response time. How, I was just taken a little bit back that those complaints didn't appear on open data. And then the other issue that we have recurring is if we have a tracking number for a DOT-related complaint, we are able to track it, but once a CAR is issued, it ends. And I think that should not be. If that hole is not resolved or closed through the CAR, I think it should remain open. And I believe there should be a process, or there should be at least a way that we can get that to the appropriate agency. And maybe that is the Mayor's Office of Operations together with 311. Maybe it has to be collaborative, so all 3 interested parties could be in the room and hear from us what our issues and concerns are. I think there are important management tools that we need, and I think the agency should hear that, what these problems are.
I think that's a big issue, because everything that's called into 311 should appear on open data, and how is it omitted? I mean, I think that's a concern in itself, because if that's omitted, what else is?
what else is on
just issues of when things get closed out, like we were talking about the DEP earlier too. Once there's a car issue, you close it out. Once DOB goes twice, it's closed out.
We haven't had the Mayor's Office of Operations come and talk about this yet, so that'll probably be that'll be our hook in, I think. And then we'll ask both other offices to be here as well, but we'll use them as the hook to have that conversation. Anyone else?
What mentioned before is that what council staff, this was discussed before.
So you guys speak a little bit louder.
So this issue was discussed before, and I think we spoke about it a year ago, about get something like what the council uses, council staff, to track our cases, and nothing has been done about it. I don't think anybody did anything about it. So I would like to start the discussion again. Hopefully we can move in the right direction. If the actual system is not available for community boards, maybe we can get something like it, a new system. That's web-based. I don't know. What I was told, and a lot of the boards were on that chain email, that was sent out that actually do it, has the capability, they hold licenses to the software, and they can provide us with our offices with the software and to be able to use the system. But if that's not available, we need something. We need something to work with, because constituents call in, residents call in, there's overflow, things get lost, things fall between the cracks, and just need to be able to know what was done. If somebody on my staff did something already, I want to be able to go on the computer and say, okay, I called this agency, this was the reply, and then I know I can, take it further. There's no comprehensive way of dealing with the way it's now. I mean, it's very hard to deal with cases the way it's set up. We don't have anything. We need something, and if council stat is not available, maybe we can develop something tailored specifically for the community boards, which I think maybe is a better way, because we deal with a lot of other things that the council members' offices don't deal, like for instance street closures, permits, stuff like that, which we can integrate into the system. But we need something in the office to help us do our work.
Okay. So we'll see. I remember the email chain you're talking about. Let's look back at that and let's have a conversation with you. We'll do it at the table and just see what they say.
If we can bring the Do It Commissioner and talk to him and actually make it an official request that the community boards are requesting that they implement some sort of system so the community boards can respond to the needs of their residents, and not just a request, just make it, he has to form some sort of task force to develop something for the community boards. Thank you.
Anyone else want to offer anything? No?
Over the last year and a half, one of my biggest issues is during capital projects with DDC. Since they're not actually out there in the initial phase, the first year and a half, because utilities out there moving their lines and everything, they don't have anything to do with what's going on. What we're finding is that for a year and a half, the utility companies are out there overlapping with each other. People are asking us questions, and there's no one that we can go to that's coordinating it all as one job. And it is a capital project job. It's just that the utilities are out there first. This last job that we had on 3rd Avenue, I took it upon myself to be that coordinating person to bring everybody to the table. But I truly believe that that's DPC's job. And they don't want to, literally, they don't want to have anything to do with it until they actually get on site. So when you have a capital project that's 2 years along the way, and you have utility companies and everyone else out there digging up the street, constantly overlapping with one another, closing the street down, shutting utilities down, someone really needs to be there to coordinate that. And I believe that that's something that we should bring up with DPC.
And you know what, Leroy, when I first became DM, we were invited to those meetings at DDC. And that's another thing that has changed, which was great because they held the meeting, the agencies were at the table, the community board was at the table, and I recall really, bringing to the table some issues they weren't familiar with. They didn't know it was a bus route, they didn't know it was, but all of a sudden that stopped. And that's something.
And those meetings were held by the mayor's office.
Right.
They were called MTCC meetings.
Yes. Yep. You're right.
I believe they were coordinated through the mayor's office. They were called
C. Yes.
It's OCMC and DOT now, and they coordinate the maintenance and protection of traffic plans, which are the comprehensive visions for how you're going to deal with any impacts on pedestrian and motor vehicle traffic during any kind of construction. And those were extremely useful meetings for us to be at, because nobody knew the detours better than we did.
That's right.
Where the signs had to go, and where the buses couldn't turn, and all of those kinds of details.
But you know what we've had the problem with the DDC projects? For whatever reason, during school testing time.
Yes.
So you have all of this construction going on
during
during statewide tests. The
Yeah.
principals, the kids, everybody's up in arms,
We have
you know, could you stop for this? And that's why it was important for us to be there,
Right.
so that we can just give them what nobody else on that level would know about our districts.
Are these different meetings, a different body than the street utility coordination meeting that DOT does every month? Or are they the same?
These are project-specific meetings.
Project specific.
Okay.
Yeah, and they would definitely invite us in. There was an older man that used to coordinate it, I don't remember his name.
Joe
Yes.
Noto.
Huh?
Joe
Joe
Noto.
Noto.
Prior to him, there was someone else, an older person.
And Joe is gone now, he was
Yeah, but they were helpful. And that kept us on radar also in terms of what to anticipate, when to anticipate and everything. And they didn't start them way in advance. They were right before the project was going to start.
But the point that Leroy was making about the lack of coordination taking place prior to a capital project is more than just the coordination, it's also the communication outwardly to the public.
Right.
We have to rely on each of the individual utilities or anyone else that's out there working now to get a public notice out there. And again, just like with compliance with Section 86, some utilities are better at it than others. Con Edison does a good job for the most part, but Time Warner and National Grid may not be as effective in reaching out to the public. And it occurred to us, not with this project, but the one before, that if DDC were to have a provision in their capital contract to hire a community construction liaison to start before any of the utilities hit the ground, which could be a year or two before the actual startup of the capital project, that could solve a lot of problems. Just one community construction liaison could actually be the coordinating entity and handle the outward communications on behalf of the entire group. Because it's not happening now.
I heard Leroy's comment differently, not so much about OCMC, although that is important information. And I, since I go on a tangent, there was a time when I could pick up the phone and talk to Dwayne Barrett personally. And DOT sent a very clear message to me that was not, that they don't want me talking to staff, you should talk to the borough commissioner's office only. And that was that. But there used to be, prior to capital projects, an interagency meeting that was hosted by Bob Yu and DDC.
That's right, I've been to those.
And everything that everyone has said about the usefulness of that communication holds true. It seemed to me that I got invited to maybe one or two after they moved to Long Island City, and then it just sort of seemed like they made a decision that, well, that's too far to ask you to come, so we're just not going to. But they were tremendously useful in part because Con Ed and all the other utilities were there, talking to each other and everyone else, and there was, someone at DDC that nominally was acting as a project manager even before the capital construction started. At least you got a photocopy of the sign-in sheet, you could call somebody and say, Con Ed said they were going to do this, but they're not doing it, or they're doing it differently, or wrong, or whatever. There was someone you could talk to. None of that existed.
When we have our presentation with DDC in September, I think we could, that's probably the best time to bring it up to general, make them aware of it. Their presentation is on planned capital projects for the borough for next year. That seems like it's perfect.
Beautiful.
Well, one of the issues that I have with DDC, and I understand it, but it's not good enough. They have their field offices on specific projects. Staten Island. Staten Island's far cry from where I do my business. And I just feel that if in fact there's not only me or my staff, but any other resident, maybe an elected official, we shouldn't have to trek. And we shouldn't have to look for somebody so far away. So on any project that they're doing in my district, I think that they should set up something local. Point blank.
I just want to add very quickly, since we're speaking of notifications, has anybody had any issues with DOT's notifications this year?
DOT what, I'm sorry?
The notifications from DOT in the past,
What
every
kind of
week.
notification?
Which ones?
I'm sorry, resurfacing, milling and resurfacing
Oh, that big
projects.
list with everybody on it?
Yeah, and so they came into the district, and I wasn't aware that they were coming, and there were other issues that we would have addressed beforehand, and I was told, well, Marnie, I sent you a list in March of all the upcoming projects, which I was aware of because they were left over from the previous fiscal year. But I had no idea whether they were coming in
When?
April, and there was no way for us to monitor. Is anybody else running into that problem?
Marnie, they shut down my district last week, 14th Avenue. They shut it down. They were supposed to be resurfacing in July and August. And all of a sudden, on Friday, I get the resurfacing schedule, and I see that 14th Avenue is being resurfaced. I'm like, hey, what's going on here? They had some asphalt allocation. I don't understand how this happened. They said we had asphalt allocation for 14th Avenue now, okay? We had to use it, so we're doing it now. We took it off the summer schedule. And meanwhile, I'm literally getting murdered in my district because 14th Avenue is the main artery traveling down till Ocean Parkway, and everybody uses 14th Avenue. And literally, Borough Park came to a standstill. And you know, they stopped the milling. They were supposed to do the paving, and I called Keith. I said, no paving, and so he did it on Saturday.
Right.
The paving he did on Saturday, so when there's no traffic. But they just took it off the summer schedule, did the milling, they started the
With no
milling without
notification.
notifying me.
And it's hard to operate, I think, that way. And sometimes, you know, we have a staff of 3 people who's out. I have to remember now to assign a job to a staff member to pull up every Friday. But on Friday, it's too late. I mean, I saw in Coney Island, they did a location that wasn't on the master list and bypassed me. It's on the boundary.
Right.
And it was at nights, and they changed it to days, and that's not being reflected. I just think it's hard to.
They're having problems. They have made some mistakes, and they've even called mistakes, and there's about 4 of them recently. Leroy, are you listening? So I don't know if it's a matter of they're waiting to staff up, or if something's going on there. But there is definitely a change in the approach of that agency.
Absolutely.
They were never perfect. They were always slow, but now there are some really egregious mistakes. And just the, I don't know.
I think part of it's communication.
It's starting to snowball is
Yeah.
concerning to me, and notification is definitely a part of it.
So it sounds to me like there's 2 different things going on. There's the notification not necessarily being adequate, particularly when things are changed. They could notify us in January and then not do the work until July, and how are we supposed to remember from January to July, which is a legitimate issue. They should be notifying you of work that's going to happen within a certain time period, or at least get back to you at the end of that time period. And then there's the issue of just things falling between the cracks that Sean was alluding to.
I think it's all related to just organization. I think there's a problem with organization right now.
So who do we take that up with?
I think there was a change in the manner of which their procedure. We used to get community boards, used to get a notice if it was in your affected board a week in advance. So you knew they were coming, and if there was an issue, you had an opportunity to address that or notify the community. Now you're not getting that. And the locations are not necessarily on that list. Yes, so that makes it very difficult.
Case in point, when they did do the resurfacing, they sent me that they're, on Friday, that they're gonna do Church Avenue to 41st. They ended up doing till 44th. Which makes a huge difference. I know it's a couple of blocks, which makes a huge difference. Because
There's an
you go
impact
into
in your
more into
neighborhood.
the neighborhood. But, so, since they were doing till 44th, they closed down till 47th already. I'm telling you, it was a mess.
Let me ask you, did they send you that notice, or did you have to go pull it up?
No, you see, the problem was that I knew that we're doing July, August resurfacing. We're not doing anything. So I get the resurfacing schedule.
You got it from the
I got
commission on
the-
March 13th,
I
and
got
it
the
went to
receipt
every
from
board.
Zeph. I got the resurfacing schedule.
Well-
Okay, and I didn't even look at it because there's nothing coming up in my district, right? But then on Friday, I was like, you know what? Let me check it out. Just want to see what all you guys are getting. So I check it out, and there,
Right.
whoa, 12 is on the list. I'm like, what's going on here? So
Yeah, but my point is that's a very tentative schedule, the way they put it in. I mean, the season runs, what does it run, April to November or
April to
whatever.
November.
well, they have
Right.
that schedule done way in advance. So
Exactly, so
They
you
have
just
their way
know
in advance.
locations, but you never know when they're coming. So for example, if you had an event on that block that weekend,
oh,
even though it was Shabbos, but I'm just saying, you weren't aware to plan.
no, I couldn't plan. I mean,
No.
it was a total disaster. I sent out the last minute tweets Friday afternoon. You s-
I don't know. I just think the communication has changed, something has changed drastically, and we're not getting that information.
We'll bring it up with DOT. We'll ask them. We'll ask them to speak to that. Any other issues, concerns?
Don't know. Most of us don't know the city of the block. I mean, people should report. So, but I want to thank each and every one of you. Over the years, I've learned many, many things from each one of you in terms of how to do my job. And for most of you, I probably won't be working with you when I do the work. I don't know which board yet.
Eight needs you.
So, the uniqueness in going over to DOT at this time is that I'm coming from the community board. So I got the chance, I got a chance to hear everything that has been happening throughout the years that I've been here and what I hear now, and hopefully I can take that over to DOT and they will hear it. I can't say they will listen, but I guess they will definitely hear what my experience is as working from the perspective of a community board. So thank you again. I look forward to working with most of you on a continued basis. And I'm gonna miss sitting around this table. I'll just be sitting back there for now. All right, so thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you.
If I hear any of you gave him a hard time, I got a guy.
Well, Leroy, it's definitely been great working with you the last 16 months since we've been here, since I've been here. So we wish you nothing but the best of luck as you go over to DOT, and we have a list. So don't worry, we know how to find you. We will know how to find you. But thank you very much, and good luck in the future. Anyone else have any announcements, things they want to share before we?
Oh, I do. June 16th, that's next Tuesday. It's the CB14 annual reception, and all are invited. Please join us. It's fun. We recognize some of the people from agencies that have gone above and beyond, but mostly we just have fun and cocktails.
June 16th?
June 16th, Tuesday, 6 to 9 at the CB14 office, 810 East 16th Street. You wrote it, so you have to be here.
Okay, great. So I will circle back to you all by the end of today, about Friday, for the city planning presentation. And anything else that comes up, you know how to reach me. Thank you very much, everyone.